Now the next session is on panel discussion. The first panel discussion is on feed production, chicken feed. This we have a moderator and 4 speakers. Moderator for this session is Dr. Syed Aman. Dr. Syed Aman, please come and please take over the panel discussion. Invite the speakers.
Getting on to the first session on chicken feed, which is undoubtedly relates very well with the theme of changing market dynamics. We see that the chicken feed costs, in those days we used to say 70% is the feed cost, but those days have gone now. We are talking about 75% to 80% as the feed cost. So I take this opportunity to invite first Dr. Pradeep Mahajan, who is a consultant, who lives in Pune. I have known him for the last 2 decades. I invite Dr. Nataraja. Dr. H.B. Nataraja is the Managing Director and Chairman of Hygiene Feeds. Dr. H.B. Nataraja, maybe he'll just join us. I invite Dr. Ravindra Nirala, the Managing Director of Valvin, and Mr. Subramaniam, who is the advisor for Van Arsen. So I think Dr. Nataraja is joining us in a moment. So maybe please take your seat, sir. We get started. So I guess the success of this session would be, if you take 1 or 2 tips back home and implement in your day-to-day activities, then I would really recognize the success. To set the stage, I would like to just show a couple of slides. This is the survey that we put together in 142 countries across the world within Alltech. So this first slide, as you see, this is a summary of last 11 years that the team has put together, and this refers to animal feed produced on this planet. What we see here is the growth of 3% year on year in total animal feed produced on this planet. By far, the broiler feed is the #1 feed, which is around 360 million tons. And the layer feed stands at #3 position in terms of the entire species on this planet, which is around 160 million tons. So starting from 960 million tons, I could go back to 11 years. I couldn't go back 60 years like Professor Jain, sir. I was not born by then. So from 960, you could see to 1,266 million tons in the last 11 years, with #1 being broiler and #3 being the layer feed. The next one, please. Coming to Indian scenario and situation, the last 11 years history, what it tells us in terms of the poultry feed growth. The year-on-year growth we see as 5.32. But mind you, this will not be the poultry industry growth as such, because as Jain sir told us, the genetic improvement, the management improvement, the nutritional improvement reduces the feed consumption, which means we could not really relate those numbers with the industry growth, but the feed growth is 5.32% over the last 11 years, year on year. And when you look at the total feed in India, if you click the next, please, what we find is 5.57% growth year on year over the last 11 years. Okay. There is a impact obviously on dairy feed in terms of growth, in terms of aqua feed, which is a significant growth as well. But this is what the figures that our team encountered, close to 44 million tons, we could say feed is being produced in India. That was produced for last year. So let me get started with the first question then. With so much happening in the feed sector, Dr. Pradeep Mahajan, Dr. Professor Devigowda sir told us about alternative feed additives. With regard to soybean, the extruded soybean versus the soybean and oil, which one would you prefer and why, sir?
Good, Aman. Straightway to the changing dynamics in feed business at least. If you look at just the soya belt, the soya cultivation and areas around the soya belt in India, you for last 3-4 years are continuously seeing the changing from usage of soybean, the soybean meal to a new product, which is kind of soya cake, if you want, which has generally around 8-9% oil. So what is being done and is being taken up by more and more broiler integrators is you buy soya seed, take out the oil partially, meaning you have 17-18% oil in seed, around 9% is taken out, around 8-9% is kept, and that is being fed to broilers. Now, you might call this changing for India, but if you look at the world, extruded full-fat soya is nothing new. I think our first the unwillingness and maybe the inability or both of first measuring the quality, then measuring the cost of that quality and the value of that quality is what is lagging in India. And therefore, we are kind of going in a full circle using the, such products. So let me say by first saying that if we start with the exact same seed, exact same quality of seed and quality of oil, there should not be any difference between whether you feed meal and oil separately or you use a product which keeps some oil. But practically everyone is seeing an improvement in performance. And there is where the quality comes in. Once the seed have been subjected to solvent extraction and the whole processing, there is no way of you telling what was the physical quality of seed which was used. Unfortunately, in India, you have a complicating factor of adulteration. And lot of meal is being adulterated. I have encountered as high as 12% adulteration. So using such a product, when you are buying seed directly from farmers, crushing it in-house and then feeding it to broiler, number one, you are ensuring the seed quality and therefore the meal quality. Same thing, if you look at oil, most of us, when we use oil for broiler feed, we're using blended oil. And that is because we want to keep the cost under control. We want to provide energy, a good source of energy, but we cannot compete for human for edible oil. And there lies the crux of the matter, why we get better performance. We are not simply comparing apple with apple. Here we are using much better oil, which has been retained from the seed, unadulterated, unmixed. These are the two things which are driving this change, and people are seeing good results. Of course, nutritionists for last 20-30 years have been proposing. There is a cost angle, and in India, even in 90s, we found extruded full-fat soya to be much costlier. Now GST has brought some change. I wouldn't go into details, but when you are buying seed for your own consumption, you don't pay GST. Whereas soya extraction plant, when they buy seed, they have to pay 5% GST. So there is straight effect of that on the cost, but the major effect and the improvement in performance to me comes from you're ensuring better quality of meal and oil. If we add these two in the exact same quality, it shouldn't matter, but it does practically.
Pelleting, Dr. Pradeep, just quickly, would there have any impact between extruded soybean and soybean plus oil?
So extrusion, when you're referring to extrusion with a good condition, first of all, and in the process people are using, we have to pay particular attention first to the heat in the process. So you need to generate enough heat to destroy the trypsin inhibitors. But extrusion will also open up the oil glands, give much larger surface area for digestion. So if you are using a good process, good extrusion, then it adds to the digestibility.
It adds to the digestibility. Just on that pelleting side of things, Mr. Subramaniam, you have done a lot of work and research on steam conditioning, and you think, is this an alternative for pellets? Could you elaborate, please?
Yes. Actually, the steam conditioning, when we talk about the steam conditioning, the main parameters like time, temperature, and moisture, these three parameters are most important in the steam conditioning.
Okay.
Moisture and temperature both are related, but time is adjustable in terms of the retention time on the conditioning equipments. So when we have a higher retention time, the product gelatinization happens well.
Okay.
So this is the main thing for the gelatinization part, and the product is cooked very well.
Okay.
So that then the next process we take it to the cooling system, meal cooler.
Okay, thanks for that, Subramaniam. Talking about the rapeseed meal, Dr. Ravindra Nerala, you have done a lot of work on the fermentation side of things. Do you think this can replace the other alternative proteins? Because we see there are a lot of limitations on using rapeseed meal. What's your thought?
Well, I think first thing I want to say is this is a revolution of alternate searches which Dr. Jain and pretty much everybody out here have been constantly in search of. One thing we always look at, on alternate proteins or, resources that we need, we look at the richness that you have within the country. And if you look at rapeseed in general, it's number 3 in the world if you look at the availability. And if you look at the rapeseed meal usage that we have, if you look prior to COVID, we were around close to around 3 million metric tons consumption. As you see today, in 2022, the data says 4.5. So definitely there is search for use of alternate protein. And why rapeseed is because it's very close to, in terms of the protein content and in terms of the balanced amino acid profile that you look at. Of course, there could be certain debates about, lysine and things like that, but very close in terms of the alternate source. Now, what limits this is your anti-nutritional factors, and typically we call this in terms of glucosinolates. Now, there is a limit of how much you can use. And if you look at the Indian scenario, we are talking anywhere between 3 to 8% kind of usage in the birds, whether it's breeder, broiler layers, etc. But you also look at, other side of the world, where in US and Canada, they go as high as 15 to 20%. So there is an opportunity. Now, how do you unleash this opportunity is where this effort is going. So I've been fortunate to work with VH Group and of course with Dr. Harsha on this. And we have done some work on how do we ensure the protein digestibility improves, how do you reduce your anti-nutritional factors, then look at how do you increase the palatability and then the bird performance. So over the last 6 months or so, we have been seriously working on, and it does look positive. There's a lot more work to be done. But looking at, the availability and alternate source, rapeseed meal is a good future-looking alternate.
Do you have anything at the moment, or still it's in the process where you could say we can increase the levels to a certain percentage in the diet?
Yes, as it stands, we can confidently tell about 10% inclusion is where we have seen good results coming. Now, how do you push it to 15? How do you push to 20? Is where the efforts are going through the fermentation program that we have.
Great, great. So, Dr. Nataraja, sir, lot coming on the alternative proteins, and you have a lot of experience in terms of the energy and the amino acid side of things. And you say it's time now to revisit those energy and amino acid levels on precision nutrition. Your take on that, please.
Definitely, Mr. Raman. This is most, I can say, very relevant and most discussed topic across the globe because of the concern over increase in commodity prices by the producers. And coming to energy and protein, it forms around 95% of the total feed cost and roughly 65 to 70% of the total cost of production. Definitely, there is a need of the hour to revisit the not only energy and protein level in the final diet, but also in the ingredients. Because actually we need to closely look at the matrix values of the ingredients, so because we need to be sure about whether we are giving right value to the ingredient.
So you're saying we need to give precise levels of these nutrients because they're expensive in nature.
Definitely.
Yeah. Great. Coming to the DDGS side of things, Dr. Pradeep, it is said that by 2025, a lot of corn going into ethanol production, and we will eventually have a lot of DDGS. What would you say, corn DDGS or rice DDGS? Or what are the limitations in general on DDGS, or what are the advantages of DDGS using in poultry diets?
So, after protein, energy, now protein and energy. When I was learning in college, we started our nutrition course with sources of energy, sources of protein. You have in DDGS which supplies both. And to me personally, I'm going through that cycle again. Meaning, when I was working in the Middle East in early 2000s, that is when US started producing a lot of DDGs. Just to give you a sense, in 93, 94, the US production of DDGs, and that was all coming from the traditional breweries, was around 2 million tons, less than 2 million, in fact, near 1 million tons. By 2007-8, it came to 33 million tons. And around 2003, 2004, when I started working in Middle East, we started getting DDGs, initial batches. And the kind of discussion we had on color, how much to use, why to use it, and all that, we have the same discussion now in India. So yes, DDGS can be used, should be used, and must be used, looking at the crunch in resources we have in our country. And Government of India has taken targets to produce total ethanol, whether it is grain-based or molasses-based or any other source, so that they replace at least partially the fuel through ethanol. And therefore, government is going to give more and more stress for more ethanol production. And they foresee higher maize production going into ethanol. In India, right now, most of the ethanol from grain is coming from rice, simply because of the economics. If you look at Indian production, I'm not talking about US, they have different number, but in India, you get around 390 liters of ethanol per ton of corn, whereas you get 480 liters from 1 ton of rice. That is one thing, and the other, the inedible rice, the broken rice can be used very effectively for ethanol production. The advantage with processing, and people have made changes to the processing, therefore we see 45, 48 and even higher percentage of protein in the DDGS available in India. So when we take learnings from rest of the world, first of all, we must realize we are talking about vastly different things. Just take the oil content from corn DDGS, it can be upwards of around 8%, whereas rice DDGS, it is less than 2. You are talking about a different protein, different makeup of that protein. That said, it is a good source of energy, protein. Also, a lot of times we forget phosphorus. We're getting concentrated source of phosphorus. Well, whatever DDGS it is, whether corn or wheat or rice. And it can be significant when you use it in 10, 12, 15% in feed. So all these give us good advantages. Now, when it becomes available more and more, we're sure the prices will be more stable. And fortunately for feed industry, for poultry industry, the DDGS, the ethanol production has already crossed a stage. Now, for ethanol, grain-based ethanol plant, just producing and selling ethanol is not going to be sufficient. They have to earn money from DDGS to make profit. That changes the dynamics from being into a seller's market to a buyer's market. So all of us now should put onus on demanding quality at a price, and I'm sure we will get it. Now, I think we should be aware of the pitfalls. The number one constraint to me is going to be mycotoxins, which just by definition get concentrated 3-4 times from grain to DDGS. Beyond that, the processing. For example, if it is corn, then addition of sulfur in steeping, for pH adjustment in fermentation, you get higher sulfur, and you need to deal with that sulfur. In dairy, people have learned the hard way. In broiler, even slightly higher sulfur will change your decad. Also, the availability of copper. So we should consider that. We need a transparency from the ethanol plants in what they are doing in the process, including the antibiotics being used to control fermentation. Any bacterial growth can stall the fermentation. They are using anaerobic yeast, and if there is bacteria coming in with the grain, it can play havoc. And that is being controlled with antibiotics. We might have some residues of antibiotics. If we walk with our eyes open, I think we have a very good product to use, and we are entering in a stage where we will be able to dictate the terms, both on quality and price.
Thanks, Dr. Pradeep. Very short, rice DDGS or corn DDGS in today's scenario, which one would you pick from economics perspective?
Because rice is yielding more ethanol and you get more protein, more than 45. If you go to corn, corn DDGS will have much less protein, less than 30. So, and even that 30 comes with processing of corn and sorghum together. Otherwise, it will be 26, 27. So, obviously, rice at the moment.
Rice at the moment, okay. And we need to, I think, as an industry, gear up to use more of corn DDGS. Eventually, the numbers being circulated talks about 5 million tons of corn DDGS being available by 2025. Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Pradeep. Coming to you, Subramaniam, I'm jumping the guns back to your steam conditioning of mash feed. What would you say the economics stand? Now you are saying the mash feed steaming could be done for breeders, for broiler finisher diets, and layer diet. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So where the economics would stand, Mr. Subramaniam?
Yeah, when we do the proper conditioning, steam
Little
con-
loudly, please. Yeah.
Yeah, when we do the proper steam conditioning, the product physical as well as the chemical quality get increased, and contamination is getting avoided. And third, on the proper conditioning, the first in, first out principle is followed. And then finally, the better digestibility, thereby we save a lot of cost on FCR. These are all the major advantages.
Yes. Would you say in terms of figures, today's scenario, what the number would be in terms of savings? In terms of rupees per ton or?
Now on FCR, I can say 0.05 something. It will be there.
0.05
0.05.
improvement. Yes. Okay, that's quite significant.
Yeah, significant, as well as the conditioning time what we follow in the Indian industry are very quite low, I can say. But there are equipments to do the conditioning up to 4 minutes of time.
Okay.
Thereby we save, thereby we kill the salmonella. It adds more value, and the equipment plays a major role on it.
Okay, great, thanks. Nataraja sir, you talked about energy and protein. Are we wasting our money today by overusing any of these?
Yeah. See, the energy, today we need to really look at our energy levels, because these modern boilers, they are very energy efficient. They can perform under, with conservative energy levels of around 2,900 to 3,050. I think compared to earlier 3,000 to 3,200, because these birds are more responsive to amino acid diets. Many researchers and trials have concluded their performance in terms of body weight gain, FCR and breast meat yield has improved by increasing amino acid levels, but without increasing energy levels concomitantly. Means I can say we need to really look actually at energy levels. I think suppose it in 5, 6 years, 10 years back, there was a practice to use more of oil to give energy so that we need to get the best performance. But now I think if your energy level, if your oil levels are crossing more than 2%, we need to really look at the problems, whether we are really considering the proper matrix values or whether the quality control is in place.
So you're suggesting around 2% oil?
Not more than actually,
Not
because
more
these birds are energy efficient because of early weight gains, and there is a less maintenance requirement.
Yes.
Their birds are itself and moreover in India, the energy although it's not a nutrient, it's a byproduct of all the carbohydrates and starch and protein. See, if you would just take example of maize to oil or fat rate, maize, the cost is around 20 rupees and the oil rates are around 85 to 90 rupees. But if you just see the ratio between the energy of maize and oil, 3,300 versus 9,000 kilocalorie, the oil cost should not cost more than 2.7 to 3 times. But in India, it is always energy is like oil costs are more than 4 to 5 times the corn prices. And since my college days, we have been told we are energy deficient nation, and still it holds good now. Therefore, definitely we need to look at energy levels in the feed very carefully, and we need to give I think that's whatever the birds need actually, we need to give the right levels of energy.
Precise nutrition we
Yeah.
need to give, and it's a loss of revenue, isn't it? Significant
Definitely.
cost.
Yeah, I can say like if you work out in any formation software, just like from 3,000 to 3,750 kilocalories, the 50 kilocalories, it will cost you minimum 700 rupees per ton of feed, which is a huge, almost 2% of the feed cost. And each kilocalorie will be 14 rupees to 15 rupees per kilocalorie. Means definitely, and once again, I'm stating that actually we are still not compared to protein. Protein, we are blessed to fortunate to have many alternatives. Like we have rapeseed meal, we have meat bone meal, cellulose goat meal, and we have a lot of starch factories producing good quality corn gluten. But in India, still I am saying we should more focus on energy levels And definitely, because as I told, around 60% of the feed cost goes to energy.
Great, great. Thanks, Nataraja sir. One final thing. Your decades of experience in feed formulations, nutrition. One secret tip you want to share with the audience on nutrition?
Yeah, definitely. I can say, like, we need to be more pragmatic while formulating, and we need to be really careful. We need to be, like, I can say, we need to look at the economics also. Just I'm telling, like, when you are formulating, you may be thinking of amino acid levels. You may not just like you are going with the 2 decimals. But like just if you go with 2 decimals and you forget, don't go to 3rd decimal. I was just working out, and in one company, the cost difference was like 80 rupees because I was going with the 3rd decimal. I was going with 2 decimals only. The cost difference, cost per ton extra was 80 rupees per ton. Imagine a company producing 5,000 tons and 80 rupees per, it's huge money, huge. Definitely 4 lakhs per month, and if you multiply it 12 times, definitely it is almost 48 lakhs to half a crore.
Significant. It's quite significant. Okay. Coming to you, Dr. Ravi, you talked about rapeseed meal fermentation, by which we can eliminate the anti-nutrition factors, improve the inclusion level in the diets. And I believe rapeseed meal is a good source of amino acids. But from the economics perspective, or in broiler diets or layer diets, any comments on economics in today's scenario?
Well, I think when we started this work, there were 2 aspects we were very clear. The first was on the nutritive side, to make sure that you get the results on the performance of the bird and nutritive value going up. Or rather, I would say more unleashed nutrition. But the other part was also very critical, which is the commercial viability. When we talk about commercial viability, we got to understand here is we got to kind of have a benchmark for comparison. And we know that the most common source that we look at is soya. So when you look at the cost associated for soya versus current rapeseed meal, the economics do show like 52 against 2022 that we are currently at. So at a raw material state, possible. But now, question is, there is a process involved. There's a cost involved in terms of, creating that environment of fermentation. Challenges associated with the range of, the raw materials that come in, which Dr. Pradeep also mentioned about, in terms of the seasonality, locality, all these sort of things. So there is raw material challenges, there is process cost, and there is also in terms of the benchmark that you want to set. So when we looked at this, with the 10% that I was referring earlier, if we are around somewhere between 45 to 50% of the soya cost, then this project becomes more viable. Okay, now the effort is how do we get that, knowing for fact is in terms of the strengths of an organization, in strengths of the raw materials that are available, how quick we can get, how quick we can process, ensuring that the nutritive value is not compromised. I think we have got some good inroads, and I would say down the line with the fermentation improvements that we have, the technologies that are available, we can stay competitive on that.
Great. And is it commercially available, Dr. Ravindra?
No, at this moment we are on the stage 1 trials at this moment, and yes, the indicators is definitely falls in place. So it's an exciting time.
Fantastic, fantastic. I don't know if any panelists have last comments, but I'll have 30 seconds to you, Dr. Pradeep. Your secret tip on nutrition to the audience.
Just one thing, focus on variation in the raw material you are using. Now, we tend to work with averages, and they are very, very deceptive. Now, I was smiling when Nataraja mentioned the 2nd and 3rd decimal. Now, here we can be talking about percentages. So keep variability of ingredients in mind. measure those variations.
Analytical part gets even more important now with so much regulations coming around.
Yes.
I really appreciate your time, gentlemen, today, and thank you. I rest this session here and I close this session here. Thanks once again for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Syed Aman, for nicely moderating this session, and also all the panelists for their insightful response. Now I invite Dr. Raghavendra Bhatta, Director of National Institute of Animal Nutrition and Physiology, for felicitating all the panelists. Responsibilities, distinguished responsibilities in scientific and academic arena. I request him to felicitate Dr. Pradeep Mahajan.